listed as, oh, there we go. Do we need to redo anything because of the timing of the recording, or are we okay?
We're okay.
Okay.
Someone's keeping minutes.
So the approval of the minutes, as I mentioned, April 9th isn't actually the date of those minutes. It's June 8th. So I'm just noting that. If we go to the motion then, the suggested motion is be it resolved that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting held June 8th, 2021 be received and approved as printed. Is there a mover and seconder for those minutes? Thank you very much, Janet, and seconded by Jeff. Thank you. Are there any comments from the minutes? Okay, seeing no comments, no discussion, I'd ask all in favor to please raise your hands. Thank you, and that carries. And so our second item of business is the election of the chair and vice chair. So our resolution is that Sally McIntyre be appointed as chair for the election of chair 2021. Is there a mover and seconder, please, for this motion? Moved by Jeff, thank you. Seconded by Janet. All in favor? Thank you. Sally, you are our chair for the election. I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. I am requesting motions for the appointment of a chair to preside over over the committee for the duration of the 2021 term. Are there any nominations for the position of chair?
I would nominate Christina Lowry.
Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Do you accept the position of chair, Krista?
I do, Sally, thank you.
Okay, there being no further nominations, I'm going to close the nominations, and we have a resolution resolved. I need a resolution that the nominations for the position of chair be closed. I have a forwarder, and bear in mind, sorry, I'm reading from a script here, so I can't see. So sorry, Phil, you put your name up for.
Yes.
Can I have a seconder?
And
Andrew, thank you.
Andrew or Jeff are offering a second.
That's great. So all in favor to close the nomination? Thank you. Carried. Okay. And then just flipping back to my instruction sheet here. This is
It's like being an airline pilot. You got to go through a checklist.
yes. Okay. So there being no further nominations and the nomination for chair being closed, Krista Lowry is duly elected by acclamation. And I forthwith yield the chair to you, Krista.
All right, thank you, Sally. So then I'm going to be doing the vice chair election. Is that how we move forward? Okay.
That's correct.
So I've got my right script here. So I am looking for nominations for the position of vice chair, please. If there's any nominations for vice chair?
Are you permitted to nominate yourself?
I'll
Nothing
nominate
says
you,
that
Phil.
There we go. Andrew has nominated you, Phil. Thank you.
No,
Are there
thank
any
you,
further
Andrew.
nominations? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? All right, seeing not. Phil, are you willing to put your yourself forward as the vice chair of this committee?
Happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Since the chair usually does most of the work, the position of vice chair is not onerous.
That's right.
You'd be surprised what can happen, Phil.
Is that right?
Especially since you've made that statement now.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for.
So I'd like a mover and seconder, please, to move the motion that the nominations of the position of vice chair be closed. Is there a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Jeff, seconded by Andrew. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. The election of vice chair is closed. There being no further nominations and the nominations for vice chair being closed, Phil Sweetnam is duly elected by acclamation. I'm just going to make sure I don't have another motion attached to this. I think not. I think that concludes our elections. Thank you very much, everyone. Strange doing this by Zoom. Very strange doing it by Zoom. So Sally, that's everything we needed for the election. I can move on to item
Yes, it
3.
is. Indeed.
Perfect. Okay, so Sally, I'll pass it over to you. So this is for the grant, the Nature Smart Climate Solutions Fund grant, on page 6 of your agenda packages.
Great. So thank you very much. This was an interesting thing that occurred earlier this year that's borne far greater fruit than I had anticipated when it came forward. The background to this is that the feds have created a fund to help address climate change, and they've dedicated a portion of that fund to be administered by Conservation Ontario. And so earlier this year, Conservation Ontario put a request out to conservation authorities looking to see if they were interested in putting forward projects that would qualify under the program. And so I put in a very ambitious set of proposals, which have been largely accepted. And I'll just go through each one with you briefly. So the carp restoration project is there's a segment of the Carp River just south of the village of Carp that was altered over the years, largely for agricultural purposes and the like, and which has been identified some time ago in as an opportunity to do wetland restoration and stream reinstatement of a naturalized system. And so I put forward a funding request to allow for that to happen. Now on that project, the proposal is that Ducks Unlimited would be the primary lead with support from ourselves, the City of Ottawa, and the Friends of the Carp. And so we put in a request for federal funds in the amount of $453,000, just over that, and 100% of it was approved. The other partners are kicking in roughly, say, $350,000, and our contribution, cash contribution on that project would be around $16,000. So there is, of course, a non-cash component to that. Ducks Unlimited has asked that we manage all the approvals with DFO, MNRF, and the like. So there is going to be some staff time required to manage the approvals through process. And as we're the lead on all of these projects from an administrative sense, there's the project management oversight. So our cash contribution on that project is $6,500. Our non-cash is closer to $36,700. The Alice project is a project that's been in the work for several months now, and you may recall that we just received a notice earlier this summer from Alice Canada that they had been able to secure $180,000 in grants over 3 years for us. And I didn't know that at the time when I put in this application. I knew roughly the dollars amount that they were going to be seeking. So when I put this application in the spring, I asked for more or less the same amount plus a bit in kind for ourselves and Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. Anyway, we put in for just under $186,000, and again, we're getting 100% of that grant. Now for that, we're not having to put in any sort of cash, and our non-cash support, our in-kind contribution in terms of staff time, is just under $3,000. So that's a huge win for us to be able to invest so little and get so much. The last project, oh, and sorry, to just remind people what the Alice project is about, it's working with the agricultural sector to identify ways in which they can mitigate their impacts on the landscape, and at the same time explore different cropping approaches and techniques, as well as looking at allocating some land for the purpose of carbon sequestration. So the last project is what we've called the Land Conservation and Acquisition Plan. And this is coming right out of our Mississippi Valley Watershed Plan, wherein we identified as a priority project in our strategic plan to do a land conservation strategy. And then subsequently, we learned at the provincial level that we were going to be having to do what they're calling a core watershed resource study or plan. And so coming out of that, they wanted a land acquisition and disposal plan. So we sort of merged all of these concepts together, what we had proposed to do at the watershed level, and then what we were hearing in the grapevine was coming through the provincial regulations. And we had to tease out what we felt would be a regulatory requirement, because the feds won't fund you to do something you legally have to do, which is makes sense. But everything else under the project, which is to, identify priority lands for acquisition, and then actually doing acquisition, was 100% fundable. So we requested 1.4 million, and we've received an allocation of 1.193 million. So a significant amount of money. But I have to say that we were only able to secure that kind of funds because our other partners are at the table there with us. And so the city of Ottawa stepped forward with $800,000, Ducks Unlimited with 100. The Land Trust, the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust, has come forward with 50, and RBCA has come forward with 200,000. So our contribution under that project is 116,500. So you can see, in relative terms, we've been able to leverage a lot of money for relatively little money. And I'd like to share with you, if I could, my screen that just shows this breakdown, just so everybody can have it there. Everybody see that all right?
Yes, we can.
So, so you can see the grand total down here is $3.888 million. Is the sum total value of these three projects through a combination of cash and non-cash contributions. So our cash contribution is the 133. Our staff contribution is 6,000. So I think we've done a good job in terms of leveraging a relatively small investment to get, a lot of work done inside our jurisdiction. The reason why I'm talking, though, is because to you today is because this is cash that we hadn't planned on. The reason why you have this report in front of you is because you need to put in place a process that allows us to distribute that amount while working to acquire those funds. And so the method that I'm proposing, and I've been having discussions with the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust about, is us running a joint fundraising campaign over the next years, where we could have a dollar matching campaign. And in fact, in theory, we could have a dollar matching campaign up to $1.4 million. So I'm not sure that we'll go for that, but the concept is that over the next 2 years, we would run a very aggressive campaign around land conservation and tell people that there's matching funds on the table. And I'm quite certain we will be able to achieve that 133. But in the meantime, as cash demands are placed on us, that we borrow from our Glencairn Reserve to meet our interim financial commitments, all of those monies are in the bank. So the nature of the motions you have in front of you. The first one looks for approval of these 3 projects. We will have to enter into contracts with Conservation Ontario to pursue them. And then to work with the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust, as well as our own foundation, to implement a fundraising campaign. And then lastly, if we have cash flow issues in the interim, to draw those funds from the Glencairn Reserve.
Okay, so does that wrap things up, Sally? Can I
Yeah.
go to questions?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll
I'll,
welcome Eli
stop
to,
sharing.
sure. Welcome Eli for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, Eli's
Sorry.
there on the. okay.
Sorry, yeah, I got the wrong Zoom link. That's why we
Oh.
had to call again and we got the right Zoom. So anyway, we're on now.
That's
Sorry
just
about for the
fine.
delay.
It happened to a few of us, so no harm, no foul. You just missed the election. That's the only
Yeah.
thing you
Oh.
missed. So, are there any questions and any comments to Sally for this report? Go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I just, from a procedural point of view, are we able to borrow from the Glencairn Reserve? I know it has stipulations on how it can be spent. So I'm wondering if, for example, there's a risk that it doesn't get paid back, that we have issues with the province because it can only be used for matching funds with respect to the province.
So that fund has been used for watershed planning and implementation type projects. It's currently used, well, was used throughout the watershed planning process to retain consultants. So there's sufficient leeway in the definition of how it can be used that I believe it is acceptable to use this.
That satisfy your question, Janet?
You know, I'm going to have to go back and look because I thought honestly that there were more restrictions than what we said. And I can't remember. I don't remember details. So, or maybe I can request. I remember when we got the money that we had to spend it on things related. I can't remember. It was related to provincial type of projects or programs. So I guess, you know, Sally, I'm just not sure. That's all.
I'm happy to go back and certainly can comment on that for the board meeting next week.
Yeah, I would be happy with that. Thank you.
Phil, you have a question?
Yes, if we go forward with this plan, and as you've mentioned, it's you've got a good high leverage for the dollars we put in. We get a good output, and congratulations to staff for putting this together. I think that's a great opportunity. The only reservation I have is if we go ahead completely with the project, like what sort of delivery dates do we have to have all this done by? Is it like the province's ridiculous plan to ask us to complete stuff by March 31st of next year, or do we have 2 years to do it in? Do you have any concept of what that, how much time do we have to put this together?
So it is a 3-year program, but it started in fiscal 2021. So it started April 1st. So we've already lost 6 months of time to deliver, but we still have 2.5 years.
But 2 years is certainly far more reasonable than what the province allows us in terms of doing something like Shadow Lake. It's a real detriment to to being able to achieve the project. I guess the other piece of experience I have is that we built a community center at Stittsville, and the idea was while the construction was on, we were going to raise funds. That just isn't nearly as effective as if you have the money for the portion of the project you're going to undertake. So I guess I would just say watch going ahead with something if you're really intending to get the money back to the Glencairn Fund. Don't jump way ahead of what you've got pledged, I guess is my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Eli?
Question maybe not so much about the project itself, but as a policy in general. So a lot of times we're going to receive requests, whether from Ducks Unlimited or other, and some of those could be a good, good program fit with our mandate. And my question is I'm not sure if the general manager or can answer this. Do we have a policy how we choose and when do we choose those projects? Because even the city, I'm thinking, sometimes we get proposals, it's great from Ducks Unlimited, but unfortunately we cannot support every one of them. So do we have a policy how we choose which one to support and which one not to support?
In a manner of speaking, yes. So of these 3 projects, the first one is already identified. That's the restoration on the Carp River. That one was already identified in the Carp River Action Plan, and was a project that the authority had wanted to do, but it was for lack of funding that we weren't able to move forward with it. The second one, having to do with Alice, was something that we had already approved as part of our 3-year pilot. And this was just me getting more money because our cash contribution on that 0. So that was an easy one. The last one, again, as I mentioned, and maybe Eli, you weren't on the call, but this is one that's both in our watershed plan, our strategic plan, and had regulatory requirements. And so what this money is allowing us to do is an enhanced version of the work we were already planning to do and leverage that work to achieve more of our watershed objective.
Okay, well, first of all, I apologize for being late, but some of the requests sometimes comes whether from Ducks Unlimited or other is a great request or even comes for saving a green space or something. But obviously we cannot save every one of them. So I'm glad to know there is a policy in place to deal with those requests. So first of all, staff can match it toward the policy, and then I guess board member can choose to follow through. That's what you're saying to me.
Yeah, I would say we have policy on it. I would say our practice is to pursue projects that the board has already indicated support for in some form.
So if the Joe public asks you, why did you pick this project and you didn't pick the other one, what will be if we don't have a policy to measure toward it?
I would say that our operations, our interim financial plan, identified various initiatives and that we go to it to help guide us. You may recall the interim financial plan you guys approved last year. One of the appendices had listed a whole raft of projects and we ranked them red, yellow, green. And so those are, help to guide us in terms of identifying projects that we know are on our horizon and their urgency. And so if we can accelerate some of them because we receive funding, we have done so.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically what you're saying, we don't have a policy per se as a policy, but we have a guideline. We agree to it as a board. So that will be, if somebody asks us, that's the answer.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
This is maybe a sidebar to what we're discussing with the 3 projects, but it could be that this committee decides to direct staff to create something that is a defined policy. It's a good question. It is a good question. It's easier to point to a policy than a practice. So if that's something this committee would like to direct staff to do, I think we can certainly do that once we've looked at the motion for the climate change fund. Okay. Phil, your hand's up, and then Janet.
Could Janet go first? I've spoken once and I forgot to ask something, so just you go ahead with Janet,
Sure.
please.
Go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to my previous point. I keep all my notes in Evernote, and I'm just looking at notes from two meetings. One was the 5th of December 2018 board meeting, and another was the MVCA Finance Committee meeting of 20 November 2018. And my notes, and we'll need to check the minutes, but just for your point on this Glencare funding, it says the province sees this funding as provincial money that must be used for provincial projects or related projects. And it says that the funds must always be matched by 50% municipal funds and only for provincially eligible projects, water control structures, commenting on official plans, and technical studies. So I just think you need to be careful how we use this reserve. And Sally, that I can give you the dates in an email if you want, but you need to go back and look at the minutes from these meetings as to how we can use that money. And I realize that it's purely borrowing, but the concern would be that you can't pay it back, and then we have a problem with the province. So just, that's my worry. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Janet. Phil, you had another comment?
Yes, just a quick question. It says that the purpose of this thing is to sequester CO2. Can you educate me a bit on how does having this project help sequester CO2? Anybody got any background on that, or what? How do we meet the objectives of this grant or whatever? Thank you.
So the premise of the program is that through the conservation of natural resources, and depending on what type of natural resource you're conserving, you are sequestering CO2 or equivalent. And so as it pertains to this particular program being run through Conservation Ontario, the focus is on riparian zones and wetlands for the carbon sequestration functions they serve. And then depending on what type of wetland you're talking about, the plant material, etc., it may get a higher or lower sequestration rating. The federal government itself is going to be providing us with the methodology for calculation.
So does that mean they've already done that evaluation to say that this project meets that sequestration objective? Have they already made that evaluation?
We weren't asked to provide a specific tonnage in terms of carbon capture equivalent. What we requested was to set targets for ourselves in terms of the type of natural system to be protected or created, and the type and the amount of acreage or hectare. So we had to tell them the type and the hectare.
As long as they've said we're okay, let's go for it. Sounds like a good project.
So Sally, just so you're aware, at least on my end, it sounds like your microphone is getting less and less. It's picking up less and less. I don't know if there's an adjustment you can make on your side.
Is that better?
Yes, that is better for me. I don't know for others if that's a little clearer. Okay, we're getting some nods and a thumbs up. If I go back to our motion, just given, where is the motion? Just given Janet's comments, I wonder, Sally or Ange, if you have a comment about the third part of the recommendation. If we weren't to borrow that $133,000 from the Glencairn Reserve, is there the possibility of using a different reserve for that money, understanding that it would be paid back as donations are collected?
If I can, I would suggest going through the operating reserve, just because that's completely discretionary for the board to spend. And if the funds are being put back, it would be easy to flow in and out of there.
Okay. So if we adjusted our recommendation so that the C portion, approved borrowing of up to 133,000 from the Glencairn Reserve or the operating reserve, which will be replenished as monies are donated pending further information. And that would allow us then to go ahead with this and have another board meeting next week, but then gather that further information that Janet, you're looking to have, so that we're really clear on whether we can do this out of the Glencairn Reserve. And if not, then we have a backup with the operating. Janet?
Yes, thank you, Krista. I think that's a good approach. I've just sent the minutes from those two meetings to you and Jeff and to Sally, which I think is pretty clear on how that reserve can be used. I should have copied you, Ange. I'm sorry. I'll forward them to you as well. It's just I mean, I'm behind this, doing these projects. I just worry that we could get caught. That's all, in using the wrong reserve for this. Thank you.
I appreciate that. You're crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and I think that's an important thing to do. And if we're comfortable with that and having the staff bring back some additional information, then when this comes forward with the board, then we can decide specifically where that would come from, which reserve would be most appropriate. But we don't tie this up and, not go forward with a really great opportunity if people are comfortable with that. Okay. Phil, is your hand up again, or is that from before? And
Yes, I just wanted to ask, in the light of the newest recommendation, it looks like we have some substantial draws on the reserve over the next couple of years. Can we come up with 133,000 plus the significant draws on the thing we've got enough in the reserve to handle that? Thank you. And I agree with Janet and Eli, this is a great project, so let's get on with it. Thank you.
so, Ange, did you have any response there? I saw you nodding, but we're okay with
Yeah,
with an
this-
additional draw?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be fine.
So are we comfortable with that amendment to the C portion of the recommendation, that it would be from either the Glencairn Reserve or the operating reserve pending that further information that'll come forward? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Is there a mover and seconder then for the recommendation as printed in the packet, actually not as printed, as amended, that we could take this to the board? Do you want me to read it? Everybody has it in front of them? Okay, is there a mover then for the motion?
I'll move.
Thank you, Eli, and a seconder. I think, Andrew, I saw your hand. If there's no further discussion, okay, I'd ask all in favor of the amended motion. Thank you, that carries. Thanks very much, everyone. And Janet, I just got the email from you, so thank you for that. All right, thanks, everyone. Our next item, this is the fee schedule for 2022. Found on page 9 of your agenda package. And, oh, hi, Matt. Good afternoon. So I'm not sure if you or Ange will be speaking to this. I'll let one of you take it away.
Probably both of us.
Over to you, it looks like, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. There's a copy of the staff report and the agenda. Every year we approach the board in regard to fee increases, and we have discussions with the South Nation and the RVCA so that we're consistent. It's important for us to be consistent, especially in the city of Ottawa, so that there's appears to be consistency and transparency in regard to the services that we all offer to the citizens and consultants and the developers. So we do have a few changes this year, which we don't have too many changes to the fee schedule over the years, but this year we did discuss the MZO fee and the major project fee, and I believe Eli had a few questions that I said I would address at this meeting, and that was a comparison in regard to what was happening provincially with these fees. So only a handful of CAs have implemented an MZO fee in their fee schedule. Lake Simcoe, Cataraqui, and Toronto region, and all of them have 100% surcharge is what we are proposing to be, again, consistent. Again, they vary on the size of the project. So In the Cataraqui, the fee would be 3,000 or 3,200, and the TRCA is 25,000 and up. So I think that's just based on, you know, the degree of development and the complexity of some of those issues. So it's consistent in regard to doubling the fee. And again, will have short turnaround times. They'll be very technical in nature. There'll be a lot on staff demands, not only on the regulations and planning staff, but engineering and potentially in biological aspects. So hopefully that provides a little bit of background into the previous questions that was discussed last month. And some of the other changes are somewhat housekeeping in nature. One is when there's been delays, the contractor's not available. So people do not get the work done over the 2-year span. And we generally issue a permit if it's going to expire within 6 months. We have an administration fee, but these are becoming more and more complex. There can be changes. So we have to do a deeper dive into issuing just a simple reissuance of the permit. So for non-routine permits, routine permits are like shorelines, just simply stabilizing a shoreline. But for non-routine permits, we're proposing to charge $250, which would recover staff time. The other thing I would note is that we are getting an influx of what's called clearance letters from solicitors, they want to know if there's any implications in regard to a transaction of property. And a lot of them ask for, could this be expedited in 3 days or 4 days? And we don't have a fee for that. And it does, there's a sense of fairness. Some people give us lots of notice. Why do we try to accommodate those people without some kind of fee associated with it? So we're proposing a $100 fee. And the last item of note is the hearing fee. And Mr. Sweetnam has always approached me on this issue. And I would agree with him that we do need to increase it. We've proposed to kind of stagger it. So in 3 years, we would be the same fee as the LPAT application, which is the old OMB application, which is $400. So if we stagger it over 3 years, then we should be at the same fee. If that's not palatable, then I'm open to suggestions. I would note that our conservation partners have relatively low fees, 130 with the South Nation and 210 at the RVCA. So in summary, that's for schedules A, B, and C, 2% increase with a few items that are long-standing. So if there's any questions in regard to those items, I'd be happy to take them.
Thanks, Matt. I have Janet and then Eli.
Yes, thank you. I noticed that the increase being asked for is only 2%, and I realize that's what we've done in the past because that's what the cost of living increase has been. But as we'll see in an upcoming, I think it's the next item on the agenda, the cost of living increase is actually 3% coming up for 2022. So I'm sort of wondering why we would want to fall behind inflation and why we aren't considering a 3% fee increase. Thank you.
We've had that discussion with the other CAs. Last year, cost of living was 0.1%, and we increased them 2% last year. And I recall many other years it was 1.7, 1.9. I don't have a list of previous years' cost of living, but to be consistent, and the South Nation does approve their fees quite early. They have their fee schedule prepared in August, and they were comfortable with 2%, and we want to be consistent with them. And over the years, it's shown that 2% has kind of fallen in line, but it goes above and beyond, or above and below the cost of living. But it's been pretty well a consistent number. I would say if it's 3% again next year, we would have a hard look at that and make a recommendation based on a two-year trend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Eli, you are next.
Did it just freeze on me or everybody else is froze for a while? Same was freeze. Okay.
Oh, I think we're okay.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, the question, have you have discussion with the other CA within the city limit? Have you have discussion what the proposed will be?
Sorry, Eli, for fees overall or for the MZO?
Yeah, for fees overall.
Yes, we had several meetings and it's very consistent. There may be one or two fees that are not consistent. That's with screening fees in regard to clearance letters for lawyers, but 95% of it is consistent.
Good. It's good to hear. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for all your work on it, man.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, Ange, did you have a comment?
Oh, no, I was just going to fill you in on the rest of the fees that are changing, so.
I just wanted to see if there was any other questions before we keep on going. Okay, not seeing anything. Right over to you.
All right, thank you. So earlier this year, we added a fee for digital copies for modeling. Our Water Resource Department had requested that, so that was previously added. They've also requested to be consistent with Rideau Valley and South Nation to charge a flat fee for providing digital and hard copies of reports. Now, this is to developers, consultants, same type of requests. So there's new fees for digital and paper copies have been added to our Schedule D, which is administrative and professional fee type of fees that we charge. And then some others are some housekeeping items. Our education center, we've had some requests to use the education center now that the education program has been suspended or on hold. There is an opportunity to rent out the space, although there's no washroom facilities or kitchen facilities. So we're proposing just to use the same fees that we would charge for our picnic shelter rental. So we've added that into Schedule D, just so that's a possibility. And as well, just to do housekeeping on our rental fees, our site supervisor on a rental agreement for a wedding or whatnot, the wedding fees were never added to our fees schedule for whatever reason. So now we've incorporated the site fees there for weddings and for staff time. If staff have been, are required for before or after hours, for special events, it's a flat fee of $30 per hour. So we've just incorporated that into the fee schedule so that all the fees are listed in one location. And then our other fees, we have increased by 2%, same as what Matt is suggesting as well. And it seemed reasonable for our photocopies and smaller fees and rentals. So that's what we've approached.
Thank you. And I see Janet has a question or comment.
Yeah, just one comment too. This is an editorial, is it should be expedited. I know there is no such word as expedited. It's a great word, I like it. But it should be expedited, and we want to make sure that shows up properly in what we put in the public domain. I know we need to approve this and move forward with this, but there is still uncertainty, as I recall, in terms of what we are going to be able to charge fees for. I just wanted, I know the province last week just released its phase 1 on the regulations, but I think the next phase is supposed to be on levies and fees. So we're going to be potentially recommending this go forward, but just to clarify, we don't yet know what the province's guidance will be on fees at this point in time. Is that correct?
Sorry, if I may, the regulation governing our fees is not anticipated to come out for some time. So you're correct. In the interim, we don't know where they're heading, but I don't believe there's a reason why we can't make these changes at this time. I haven't heard anything that would lead me to believe that these type of changes will not be permitted.
All right, thank you.
Good question, Janet. Eli and then Phil.
Just a quick question to the treasurer. Angie, when you talk about electronic fee or digital fee, so you're talking about requesting something from the board, whether from lawyers or planners or something like this. Is that what you're referencing to?
Actually, so if a developer is looking for a copy of a report, I'm assuming like a floodplain mapping report or something like that. If it's 30 pages long, they're proposing it'll cost $140, whether it be digital copy that they're requesting or a hard copy to be sent to them.
No, I'm good. I'm good to do this, to be honest with you, because a lot of folks seeing some absency in some of the policies, and that's why I don't want to sound like the godfather of policies, but without a policy in place, you won't be able to charge that. So I'm glad you're doing this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Phil. So you're muted, Phil.
All right.
There you go.
Sorry, I hit it once, but I guess not hard enough. Yes, I think my question is much the same as what Eli had. It doesn't matter whether they're requesting 140 page or 100+ page thing and you give it to them as a photocopy, or whether you send them a digital copy. It seems that seems a little inappropriate to me, but I mean, it's not so much money that it's. I think the digital copies will be far easier to forward, and then just have somebody spend an hour at the photocopy machine. I think there should be some recognition that digital is the way of the future. Right? But I can live with what you propose, but I think there should be some balance in what's there. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Are there any other comments or any questions to the staff on the 2022 fee schedule? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'd like to go to the motion, and that's be it resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the board approve the 2022 fee schedules as presented in staff report 3166-21. Is there a mover and seconder, please, for the motion? Moved by Jeff, seconded by Andrew. And if there's no further comments, and ask all in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you, and the motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Get back to my other one here. So the 2022 budget assumptions, and this is page 19 of your package. And Sally, you will present this.
Yes, thank you, Krista. So the proposed approach for this year's budget, setting the budget assumptions is very much as has been done in previous years. The process to be followed is it starts with this presentation to you and then to the board next week. And then over the month of October, November, we'll develop the draft budget, which then we'll bring back to this committee.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but the voice is disappearing again.
Oh, is this better?
Much better.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying that this committee will receive the draft budget in November before it goes to the board in December. And then again, it will come back to this committee if there are significant changes in mid-February. But at minimum, this committee will be meeting again in February to see the audited financial statements before the final budget goes to the AGM in February. So the basis that we typically use for establishing what the levy increases will be follows what the direction is given to city staff at the City of Ottawa due to the significant proportion of funding coming from the city. So the direction given to city staff this year was that to assume an increase in property assessment value based upon growth of 1.4% of the current taxation. And then onto which we add a total of 3% on the total levy, the municipal levy. So that, and I gather that the 3% was based upon, of course, the lesser amount last year. So this year it's 3%. And if you average between the 2 years, it comes out to roughly 2%. So the capital levy, you'll recall, we identified in last year's update to the 10-year capital plan, that an increase above these standard rates was going to be required to meet the financial commitments of the organization for its capital renewal program. Now, this 4.5% has not been adjusted to reflect the most recent tender bids on the Shabamika. We're going to withhold adjusting this capital increase any further until we've had the opportunity to assess the dam, the mechanical and the concrete structure to determine whether or not that element needs to be replaced in the near term, or if we can defer that component of the project. So, you know, the most critical piece, of course, was the earthen embankment, and we're proceeding with that, as you know. So this proposed 4.5 capital increase is in line with what had been previously approved by the board as part of the 10-year capital plan. The increases for cost of living and mileage rates, we again go to a standard CPI index, and we always look at the August rate. And so the proposed increases for staff, last year it was 0.1. This year, the August rate was quoted as 4.1. So again, over the 2 years, it's going to average about 2%. And the mileage rate quoted for this year is to be 0.57 based upon that same sort of index published by the National Joint Council. So that's a 2-cent increase over what we currently pay. The report also mentions, of course, the wage and wage band adjustments that were approved late last year and earlier this year. And as I think you are aware, based upon the last item on the agenda, the workforce plan, we're looking to integrate those in on top of these increases identified here. So this motion just simply asks for approval of what the City of Ottawa had already recommended and the capital budget increase that this board has already indicated support for.
All right, thank you, Sally. Questions or comments on these assumptions for the 2022 budget? Okay, seeing none. Going to our resolution. Oh, we have a couple questions. Sorry. So Phil and then Eli.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on, we've approved that there would be an increase in the amount of capital required. And did I hear that that would be also adjusted by the 4.5, 4.3, whatever it is, % from what we approved last year? Is that what we're doing, or are we just leaving it what we had last year?
We're leaving it as approved last year as part of our 10-year capital plan. So the 4.5 is the increase previously approved by the board as part of the 10-year capital.
Just say that again. I understand our operating costs go up by 4.5%. Does the capital cost go, it's staying at what was approved last year, or it doesn't increase? Is that what you told me?
So the 4.5% increase to the capital budget is the percentage increase that the board approved last year as part of the 10-year capital plan. We haven't inflated it whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Eli.
I don't have much of a question, but just rather a comment to Sally. Thank you, Sally, for a good detailed report and follow the direction of the city treasurer. So be happy to champion for you on committee, because this is consistent with what we've been done in the past. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks,
That's my Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Janet, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can approve this in this order before having the discussion on the next topic. Because it may very well be that coming out of the next topic, that we decide that we might want to increase the levy more. Now, we might not, but there's an approach being recommended in the next topic that you know, in terms of using reserves and things like that. And we may or may not all agree to that, in which case we would have to revisit what the assumptions are for the budget going forward. So I'm wondering whether the decision or the motion on this could be deferred until after the discussion on the work plan, and what other people think of that. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Janet, are you meaning deferred to when the workforce plan discussion happens at the board, or do you meaning
No,
the
no.
discussion we're having here this afternoon?
Just today, just to take
Okay.
this resolution and in fact, I meant to think or say that I thought the work plan should move up in the agenda because it could have impact on other things. But I'm not trying to defer it until after we've had this discussion in this committee, so we could just leave the resolution to the last item. And it may be that nothing changes. We're not going to change what the recommendation is here. But I think we need to leave this open until we've had the work plan discussion.
Sure, I think that's a fair comment. I don't think we need to defer or anything. I think we just need to know to come
Sorry,
back to
defers-
it.
Yeah, sorry, defer is the wrong
Yeah.
word. Yes.
Well, I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to put it off till after next week, but
Sorry, didn't use the right word.
but yeah, I think there's no problem unless anybody has a strong objection. I don't think there's any problem with coming back.
Not
to
a
this.
problem, sorry, not a problem, but I just want you to know, as I told you, we'll let you know before I have to leave shortly for another meeting, unfortunately, but we have the OP meeting in the city of Ottawa this coming week, and I can tell you we're swimming just. But I'll stay for 5 more minutes, but then unfortunately I have to go. But I'm good with the report as I see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eli. So if there's no other comments at this point, then on the budget assumptions discussion, why don't we jump ahead to the workforce presentation? I think everyone was circulated the workforce plan as well. So I'll pass this back over to you, Sally, and we'll come back to the budget assumptions discussion.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you. Everybody see that all right?
Yes.
So, as you can, we discussed back in the spring in April, MVCA is facing various challenges at the present time, including inadequate staff resources, and this is, a major source of stress and issues around morale in the organization. The inadequate staff resources also poses significant risk to the organization in terms of corporate resiliency. And, there's a variety of issues that need to be addressed, but certainly workload is one of them, and our ability to provide a desirable workplace with competitive wages and benefits. And so this is just one excerpt from the survey that was conducted August of staff by OCAL, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Organization here in Ontario. You can see that, a significant proportion of staff feel that we're under-resourced, and that this is having very real impacts on staff. So what is driving these workload issues? Well, the first one is we are actively managing risk in a manner that we hadn't until recent years. This started before I came on the scene with the doing the environmental impact assessment for the Shabamiko Lake Dam, and then and the development of the first version of the 10-year capital plan. So, MVCA had identified that it needed to do a lot of work around its assets, and interestingly enough, the province now mandates that CAs their asset management plans, and so in developing and implementing the asset management plan and enhancing our expanding the model to include the whole of the watershed and updating floodplain mapping, this has placed pressures on the organization that it wasn't actually resourced to do. The next one is responding to demand, as we've discussed previously, there's been all sorts of growth and development in the lower Mississippi and the Carp watershed. And that coupled with the reconstruction associated with the 2019 and 2017 floods has put a significant pressure on the whole planning and regs group, but also the engineering group, which needs to do the technical reviews. And these applications are increasingly complex. I provide some statistics there in the report for you, you know, in terms of the number of applications that now require environmental impact statements or pertaining to wetland developments, because all the easy land has been developed, and so much of the many of the applications coming in today are dealing with complex resource impacted environments. Then lastly, it is not lost on us that unfortunately there's been a decrease in quality of submissions that require more time of staff to review and to navigate. There's a lot more to and fro than there used to be. You know, anecdotally, I think the consulting sector itself is also stressed under the growth pressures and the checks and balances perhaps that used to go into submissions isn't there today, and we're having to navigate that. So lastly, of course, is all the legislative and funding changes that have occurred and will continue to occur. We just got the draft regulation last week, and I will be presenting to the board on that next week, but there's a fair amount of work ahead of us. But to date, you know, we had to deal with the funding cut, and the decision of the board at that time was they were not going to accept the downloading of costs to the municipal level. And so there was a 1.5 FTE cut to the organization. The defunding of the museum operations, you know, there's a lot of work that's gone on around trying to figure out how we're going to transition those operations to a third party. And then lastly is the whole consultation process around the regulations and the forthcoming work on transition plans and MOUs. So all that to say, we've had, you know, impacts on our time, and they are going to continue. So this table shows you our staffing complement today. Some of the discussion behind this is when you look at that column called contract employees at 6.6. That's a lot of staff who have been largely reallocated or
Sally,
held in
you're
contract
fading a little bit,
positions.
Sally. Could you speak?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, much
Is that
better.
any better? Yeah.
Way
Okay,
better.
okay, terrific. Sorry, the hand slips a bit as one talks. So, you know, we used to have, for example, summer students and other type positions that were temporary in nature. And I've had to reassign those to meet demand. But that meant we gave up effectively all those student positions. And when we've had operating surpluses, I've, you know, been in a position to try to create some additional positions, but they weren't part of our original staff complement. And they've been in these positions long enough now, and demand hasn't subsided at all, that, you know, there's a desire to move these into permanent type positions, because of course people in contract positions do not feel secure in their employment. They don't have benefits, and therefore they're more likely to move on. And we've certainly seen that. I'm going to move on to the next slide there. I guess the good news here in this is that whereas we had 2 vacancies shown, we've been successful in filling one of those vacancies. The other vacancy I'm going to talk about, and that was Shannon's position, because I'm proposing we use alternative service delivery method as opposed to a staffing, and that we redeploy that FTE to another purpose. So this org chart illustrates where I think we need to be going as an organization to meet our objectives around succession planning, having sufficient staff to meet the demands in the community, and deliver on our asset management plan and our risk management approach outlined in our interim financial plan. So I'm going to start with the yellow. And the yellows are what I refer to as delete create. It's where we use an existing FTE, but we repurpose it for another purpose. So we currently have 2 financial assistants, and we have our museum curator. And so the proposal is to convert one of those admin assistants to a financial assistant, and this will provide greater depth of resiliency in terms of financial management to support when the treasurer goes on vacations or should she leave for some reason, that we would have backup support that would have greater familiarity with the finances of the organization. Community liaison person would only take effect when the museum transfers out of our hands. And this one would be sort of a consolidation of different types of responsibilities. Currently, we do have a person who oversees all the bookings at the Milliken Tail. So that function needs to continue to be delivered, but also there's a need for volunteer management and fundraising. And so the concept here is that this community liaison person could work in support of our own operations, but also the fundraising activities of the foundation and support other type of communications of a routine nature. The third yellow box is the water resource engineer. We feel we strongly need another water resource engineer, and this is a delete create of Shannon's position, the communications position. I think if we're needing an engineer on staff, I can contract out for specialized communication services, but I cannot contract out for the role we need this person to play in terms of supervising our significant capital programs, special projects that we have underway and that we've committed to. So I think if we're looking to manage the increase to the FTE contingent, that this is the most appropriate use of that FTE. So now I'm going to move on to the oranges, or the ones both that are hatched and solid, because they represent the new position. So you'll see that they're largely related to students of some shape or form. And interestingly enough, students have historically played a significant role in succession planning at the Conservation Authority. Almost to a person, everybody working at the CA at the staff level, often a good number of them came through student programs. And, you know, starting at the bottom, students become engineers in training become engineers. Similarly, our students have led to the maintenance technician positions, as well as the planning tech positions and the regulations tech positions. And so these students provide a training ground and assessment vehicle for us to identify potential employees that has allowed us to fill vacancies when they've come through. The other position that's hatched is the junior planner position, and similar to the engineer in training is, you know, summer students could move into a junior planner, and a junior planner could move into a watershed planner or an environmental planner position. And all of those positions, including the junior planner, allow staff to take vacations. And this has been a problem, as it has been for many organizations due to COVID, but it was an issue for this organization even pre-COVID because of the amount of overtime people are taking or having to put in and then take. And I go into this in a bit more explanation in the report, but because we don't pay people overtime, we provide them with time off in lieu, and everybody takes time off in lieu first because it expires at the end of each calendar year, and then they take their vacation. So that vacation contingent becomes an ongoing liability. These summer students and provide the opportunity for staff to take much needed vacation. The last orange position is the analyst you see reporting to me, and this is a proposed co-op position that would be on an ongoing rotating basis that could assist me in delivering on all the things that are going to have to be carried out under the new regulations, as well as the various reporting requirements that we have going forward. It'll also assist the management team in carrying out some of the change management initiatives that we don't need to be done within the organization, including those having to do with those challenges that we're facing as an organization around information management, etc. So the last couple of things I wanted to highlight on this is the funding mechanisms behind all these positions. So all the blue ones are currently funded, so are the yellow ones. The hatched green and the green ones are, well, the solid green ones are currently funded, but we're proposing that anything with green be in future full cost recovery. And this is where we're proposing a fee study in partnership with Rideau Valley Conservation Authority and South Nation Conservation in 2023, so that we can, starting in 2024, be cost recovering for all of these positions. Because what these positions represent is the additional staff we really need to meet the volume demands of the community, or to be able to achieve the kind of service levels that are expected of us, and quite frankly, that we expect of ourselves. We need these positions to be able to achieve them. But I think it's fair to say that if we're to maintain those kind of service levels, that those benefiting from those positions need to pay on a user pay basis. The two hatched, the purple and the hatched purple, currently the GIS specialist one is only partially funded, and we feel that that position is core to our organization and to our mandate, and really shouldn't be subsidized, that it needs to be 100% on the levy. The engineering training, we also feel needs to be 50% funded on the levy, as would be the junior planner, because as we've indicated, these two positions allow us to move forward on some of the key special projects that the organization has committed to under the interim financial plan. And one of the things that we've, just illustrated with that prior grant program is many of these programs require you to put 50% on the table. And so if we commit 50% funding to those two positions, it will really enhance our ability to access future grants to carry out work we've already planned to do. That's the thinking behind those. And then lastly, everything you see outlined in red are positions that have not undergone any form of review since 2011 and really need to be reviewed in terms of the job description, the evaluation of that job description using the corporate matrix, and then market assess to make sure that those positions are being competitively paid. So in the implementation plan, you'll see where we're proposing to review those and to implement changes as needed going forward. So what this means in actual FTEs is an increase of 3.33 FTEs. So it's the addition of one additional permanent position, which is the junior planner, and 5 student positions, which are 4 which are summer students, and the 1 year-round position reporting to me. So the other actions outlined in the report there for you, there's a host of activities, starting with ongoing work with the Joint Health and Safety Committee to look at addressing some of the psychosocial issues in the workplace, Workload is absolutely one of them, but there are other stresses in the workplace that we need to review and make progress on. One of them relates to management supervisory relations, and so I'm recommending that additional training be provided to give managers and supervisors the support they need and training and tools they need to engage with their staff more effectively, so that there isn't the stress between management and staff. Looking at additional opportunities for shared service delivery. So I speak at a fair amount of length in the report about opportunities for shared services. Many CAs, we don't have the volume of work to support positions full-time, but some of us have been able to make investments in some positions that others can capitalize on. So for example, the next one down is the health and safety coordinator. We had a 1/10 FTE allocated to that, but just simply due to volume of work, that person is not able to even give it that amount of time. So we're looking at how we can meet that need for health and safety coordinator through accessing the expertise of another CA, or collectively for several CAs to retain a third party to deliver that support role for us. Clarifying roles and responsibilities for information and communication technology. This is, an area that collectively has been identified as something we need to work on. And some of these things that I've identified here are, I would call continuous improvement and things that we will do in-house and have no cost component other than time. So the next three, I've already discussed 3 or 4. One of the things, number 10, establish reserve for planning and regulations. This has been, under discussion for a few years now. In fact, because of the fluctuations that can occur within the planning and regulatory environment, there's no indication that the rate of applications and growth is going to change anytime soon. But in the event that it does, the goal of this reserve would be to put any surplus revenues into this reserve fund, so that, the rainy day when there is a downturn, that we have that reserve to draw upon. One of the key things that we need to move forward on is cross-training of staff. So you'll see, in addition to the management supervisor training, we have funds set aside for cross-training of staff. This is particularly essential in some of those core functions that are identified in the report. From an employee attraction and retention perspective, there are several policies in the employee manual that need to be reviewed and updated, as I think many organizations are doing post-COVID, looking at workplace flexibility, and how there are other policies related to technology need to be updated to reflect the changing work environment. Pardon me. 13 is to review the education programming approach. You'll recall that we suspended the program due to COVID, and we have substituted, at least on a 3-year pilot basis, the stewardship program. Neither program is going to be mandatory under the new regulations based upon what was published last week. And so, we need to have a discussion about what does the future of our education programming look like. And so I've identified this because if we reinstitute it, there will be costs associated with that. We had previously come to the board and in fact budgeted for a timesheet system, and we're also recommending a payroll system. Those had been put on hold in part because of COVID, but we will absolutely need to move forward with those for our future management of MOUs, but also to provide greater resiliency. Ange is the only person in our organization who knows how to do payroll. That's a significant vulnerability. And then lastly, to develop and implement a volunteer program. This has been much talked about off and on over the years in terms of if we are to focus as an organization on our core mandate, then can we use volunteers to deliver on those things that MVCA is not able to? Ergo, the discussion about having sort of a volunteer coordinator role as part of that community liaison position. So, you know, through these various actions and the additional FTEs that I've identified, we feel that, you know, this will help us to address the workload balance issues and improve our corporate resiliency. You know, it'll provide for opportunities for advancement of staff and the relations between staff and management through, you know, this training program. It will also ensure that work being performed today is actually reflective of what's on people's job descriptions and that they're being paid competitive wages that will help us to retain staff and that we're able to deliver on those service delivery standards that have been set by Conservation Ontario and that the public expect. And also for us to deliver on those priority risk management projects that were identified in the interim financial plan. And lastly, of course, all of this mitigates our risk of errors, sick leave, reputational risk, and other corporate liabilities associated with those. So this table illustrates the first line shows what had been previously committed to based upon the reports brought forward in December of last year and April of this year regarding wage increases. And then to which we've identified new pressures and offsetting revenues. So you can see that the net impact on an annualized basis actually goes down over time, and that's because of some of the upfront costs that we need to incur, and then ultimately the ability to do greater cost recovery starting in 2023 and into 2024. So for this year, 2022, we're recommending that 25% of that be put onto the levy. So whereas that previous report had suggested, you know, the 1.4 growth in tax assessment and the 3% operating budget, 4.5 capital budget, this motion says amend that to include an additional $87,000 for workforce adjustment, with the balance going on the operating reserve. You can see that next year, the net impact on budget is $296,000. The increment goes up to 148 to 11 on the levy. So, and then lastly, it would go up to a full 253, 688 on the levy in 2024. Oops. So the last thing we did want to talk about is the impact on the operating reserve. So with a projected year-end balance of the reserve of $924,000, that would what we're proposing to withdraw would drop that from a 4-month reserve to a 3-month reserve. And a 3-month reserve is, you know, the minimum that is recommended. If you do various research on these sorts of things, you know, you should not have less than 3-month reserve in your operating reserve. So I think going forward, while we've recommended that next year it be 50% on the operating reserve, that may or may not be possible if we want to adhere to maintaining a 3-month cash flow in our operating reserve. Currently, the board or MVCA has no policy regarding what it maintains in an operating reserve. I think we should have one, and I would think it should state no less than 3 months, but that can be for another day.
So Sally,
So,
I think I'm
I'll
going
leave
to
it
take
there.
take this. Yeah, thank you. I'm just aware that there's other commitments and whatnot that people need to get to, and I'd like some time for us to discuss this workforce plan and then be able to come back to the budgeting assumptions for the 2022 budget. So I just want to turn to the members of the committee and see what comments you may have or questions you may have on this work plan. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's certainly a large piece of work, and I know a lot of work went into this. I think that needs to be acknowledged. With respect to the last part of the presentation, the financial impacts, I'm just wondering, we're shaving it a little thin with our reserves by being so gentle on the municipal levy. And I know other sources aren't being as gentle on municipalities as we are being here. I was just wondering if that share at the end, we might want to consider adjusting the rate at which it's phased in, rather than 25, 50, and 100. We would look at sort of a 1/3, 2/3, 100 at the end of the day. Or do you think that would be too much of a shock in terms of a levy increase?
Sally?
You're looking, yeah, okay. So,
Table 2.
yeah, I would say that the city of Ottawa is likely, you know, there's a lion's share impact of this, and I've already briefed Steve Willis, the general manager there, that we would possibly be looking for additional resources for additional staffing because of workload issues. He had no reaction whatsoever other than to say, yeah, we're facing the same thing. But he seemed to have no issue with the fact that we would be coming forward with an additional ask. As for the other municipalities, I really look to the other members of committee and board for direction there.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Phil and then Janet.
Yes, thank you. Just clarifying, we definitely want, in addition to the 4.3, you're asking for another $87,036 over and above that 4.3%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought we were asking for, but I just had some different information. So thank you for that. I think there's some merit in what Chair Jeff is suggesting. Perhaps could you look at putting a third of the requested increase and take a little less out of your reserves? I mean, we have, as you've carefully outlined, we have a lot of additional responsibilities, and the challenge is right now, in my view, we're living on our reserves, as opposed to by taking money out of the Glencairn Fund for the Chattawamika Lake Dam, and so much stuff is coming from reserves. So I would like us to consider whether it's appropriate to ask for a third. Eli is a good champion, and I think if he's convinced, I think we should. Then I think it will make it through Ottawa Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Janet.
Yeah, so a question for Sally. Based on this agenda came out on the 7th, and the new regs came out on the 7th as well. Based on those new regs, do you see any adjustment to what you have proposed?
Well, I would say the good news is that the phasing is a bit different. They're giving us more time. The workload will be the same, and I understand that some things are prescribed in regulation regarding some of the requirements, and I'll be honest, I haven't had the chance to review those details yet. So I guess in a short answer, the phasing might change, but the workload won't.
Okay, because related to that, and I just want to clarify, and you made a comment, when I look at page 55 of the agenda package, it says mandate core watershed-based resource management strategy. It does include things like a stewardship program, and you did mention the education program. But from my reading of the regs, the new regs, those would not be covered. We would have to raise non-levy type funds to cover those. Is that your interpretation?
Correct.
Okay, all right, then related to that, if I may, Madam Chairperson, just one more comment. I agree with Jeff and Phil that I think we're not being aggressive enough in increasing the levy, because essentially what we're saying is we haven't been charging enough to adequately staff for the work that we do. I mean, assuming that everything that has been identified in that chart is core and is core under the new mandate, then the levy should be paying for that. And I think, optically taking some money out of the operating reserve to sort of delay the hit is optically good to do that. But I think we're really, we had a reserve over $1 million 2 years ago, and we haven't had a surplus since, right? So I think we do need to be more aggressive, and I would support what Jeff, I was glad you said that, Jeff, and I would support what Jeff has stated. And I'm even wondering if 1/3 is not enough. So thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Andrew.
So something that Jeff and I had a quick conversation about earlier today is development charges and how to utilize them. And if there's any ability to, there's a lot of free money in construction, particularly when it is, bringing in lakefront properties, that sort of thing. Is there any way we can leverage that instead of just a straight tax by fee service or something like that? Because that's really like it's you're not going to get a lot of pushback on development for that sort of thing. Not as much as you would as a straight tax percentage. So I just don't know what the structure is as far as the Conservation Authority and how they can really go after those types of funds.
So, if I may, this is the regs that we're actually waiting for, is to tell us where and how we can levy, as well as other cost recovery methods. So, we looked earlier at this meeting at our fee schedule. What we've tried to do in the past, and Matt mentioned this, is to have a similar approach amongst ourselves, and RBCA and South Nation, because we all operate in the city of Ottawa. So if we were to contemplate deviating from the current cost recovery method on our fees, for example, we would want to do so in partnership with those two other CAs. And that's where we've proposed in 2023, once these regs are in place and in effect, that the three CAs do collaborate around a fee study and figure out how we improve cost recovery across all three of our organizations. I have to sit down with the new regulation and talk to the other two GMs to see whether there's an opportunity maybe to move that forward to 2022. But given that we're still waiting for that other regulation, I think the timing that we've set out here is the most realistic.
Thanks for
that. Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to follow up on Andrew's point, when those discussions happen, it would be good to find a way. I don't know if this would have to go through Conservation Ontario as well, for a municipality to be able to look at the levy that comes from the MVCA and determine if there's a portion of the levy that they could pay for using development fees as well, because that's a source of revenue for them that they can have in their planning, that they can legitimately charge back to the developers who are also flopping fees down at the MVCA. That's a missing piece in the financial puzzle right now that municipalities should be able to get on board with, in terms of being able to have the MVCA say, here's your levy, and by the way, here's the portion that could be paid for through your development permit fees. Just a thought in passing, but otherwise, I think the schedule that you've put in front of us works.
Jeff, Janet, you have another comment?
I just wanted to comment on what Jeff just said, and I hope he appreciates the irony given what the machinations of the province and what they've been motivated by. And that's all I'm going to say.
So there's no other comments. I'm looking at our recommendation, and I'm also going to look maybe to Jeff or Janet. It sounds like we'd like to put forward an amendment either to section B or an additional C item on here. So I'm just going to look to either of you to see if there's something you'd like to amend there, or do we want to go ahead increasing the municipal levy by an additional 87,000, or did we want to adjust that given your comments in our discussion? Are we comfortable with that at this point?
So I'm just willing, as far as like amending table 2 to be 30, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, rather than 25, 50, 100. Could that, because I sense that there's general support for that at the committee. I'm just wondering if Sally could take that as direction without having it put in the motion.
I can definitely take that as direction. We might want to amend item B then to remove the 87,000 and make mention of the additional amount prescribed by table 2 as amended, or something to that effect.
That's what by an additional amount prescribed in table 2 to provide for workforce adjustments.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually cleaner than trying to come up with a number. Yeah.
Mm.
So if we amend table 2, as Jeff had outlined, and then amend section B of the resolution to adjust the 2022 operating budget assumptions as prescribed by table 2 to provide for workforce adjustments. I think that's captured what we just had mentioned. Janet?
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it's enough. So, I mean, I really think we should be going more than 1/3. And I think that I'd be rather go for something like 40%. If I have to support 1/3, I'll give in, but I mean, we are basically underfunded and we need the money from the municipalities to be paying for the services that we're providing. That's the reality. So it's a philosophical point of view, and I just think we should be getting more the first year.
And your recommended amount is 50%? Sorry, I didn't catch what you were saying.
I there are optics, and where that fine line is, I would go with 40, 80, or 40, 75, 100, or something like that. That's what I would prefer. Now, I'm not a council person, right? So I don't, I'm not going to be the one facing the taxpayers the way the rest of you are, but I am a taxpayer. So it's, I throw it out there. I would like 40, 75, 100.
And Jeff, remind what you had suggested.
I'd proposed 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Thinking about it as a counselor who's going into the 2022 budget season and knowing what the CPI is on construction and other infrastructure that's
And the 2022
happening.
election.
Well, we're not supposed to think about that in our
Not
decision.
supposed to, but guess you will.
And Andrew, your hand's raised. Did you have another comment?
I'm basically going to echo Jeff, and I understand what Janet's saying, and the money's necessary, but it's too political, and it's going to be, I was going to mention that there's an election coming. You're going to go for an ask right when your councillors are going to be trying to put on their best faces and do their thing. It's tricky. So I think the 1/3 is even tough there. I think it's not so much, in our municipality, it's not a great deal of money comparatively for us, but if you're talking about City of Ottawa and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, you start getting into some pretty big numbers. And I think you got to be a little delicate about the political situation. Leading up to a bigger ask, I think is a good idea. Like giving them the heads up that this is coming, just so you're aware. So the small ask, the big ask, I think is a good way to do it.
So we have an amendment that would be the third, 2/3, 3/3 in table 2. We do have that moved, but we don't have it seconded.
Could
So if
you,
there's
could you
something-
consider, would you consider making that 1/3, 2/3 full payment? People don't understand fractions, and 3/3, I think, is going to confuse them. That's my experience with people in fractions. But I could live with
Sure.
3/3 if that's what you think is the right answer, Jeff. But I agree with the concept that, Janet and I don't have to face a re-election. Well, I suppose we do in a way, but I think we should have some empathy for that. And if the year after the election, you want to go up to 75%, there's the time to do it, not the time just before an election. So I think we have to have some empathy for these guys have got to knock on the doors and get people to say you're the right people for the job. Thank you.
So it's moved, and Andrew, you were in the process of seconding the amendment.
Second, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And Janet, you have another comment?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to make one more comment with
Sure.
due respect and sympathy to the elected members, but your fiduciary duty is to the MVCA, right? You're sitting on this board and this committee, and that's your fiduciary duty. And so I understand and I'm sympathetic, so, and there you go. Just want to make that comment. Thank you.
We are still higher than what the staff recommendation is, so we can feel positive about that. Andrew, you had another comment.
Yeah, just to clarify that last comment, it's the strategy of the ask. I think it's more important than the actual personal responsibility of voting on it as a councillor. It's more that, we all understand the type of politics of asking for money. If you ask for money in an election year, it's a touchier subject in the first year of a 4-year term. So I'm only coming at it from a strategic point of view that's a safer bet. You don't want to get turned down, or you don't want to get into a fight. So I think this is a way that we can.
I do understand, Andrew. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I have a hard stop at 3:30. So I just want to put that out, and I'll have to pass this over to Phil if we're not done at 3:30. So I just want to mention that. So we have an amendment to table 2 and an amendment to the motion as well. Is there any other discussion on this amendment for 1/3, 2/3, and 100% or 3/3?
Just I worked out the number, and it's still going to be $116,000 that we'll be asking for. That's what a third is. But bear in mind, for those who have to knock on doors, it's Ottawa pays 90% of that, or at least that's the way it's been up to now.
Right.
It's Sally here. If I could just make a request, can we make it 33%, 66%, and 100%? It'll make the communications and math easier.
Sure. So 33%, 66%, 100%.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll just make a friendly amendment to your amendment, if that's okay, Jeff and Andrew.
I'm fine.
All right.
Got to adjust for the new math.
That's right. All right. Any other discussion on the amendment to table 2 and the amendment then to the motion, the B portion of the motion? Okay. The way I've set this up, I guess we don't have a motion on the floor, so it can just be changed. So I don't think we need to vote on the amendment. If we're comfortable with where we're at, I would go to the motion regarding the workforce plan. So our motion would be it resolved that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the board receive the workforce plan attached to staff report 3168-21 and adjust the 2022 operating budget assumptions to increase the municipal levy as prescribed by table 2 to provide for workforce adjustments. So Jeff, you've moved. Andrew, you had seconded. Do we have any further discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing not, all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, we got there. Thanks very much, everyone. That's carried. So then if we go back to the motion with the our 2022 budget assumptions. So we need to massage this then a little bit. So for two, a municipal levy increase of 3%, do we want to increase, how would we do this the easiest way? So municipal levy increase of 3% to the operating budget, as well as the increase as prescribed in table 2 of the workforce plan. Would that be adequate, Sally?
Yes.
That would be okay. And then the
Yep.
We'll have it spelled out for the board what that actually means. Okay. So looking then again at the at that motion, it would be it resolved that the board of directors directs staff to develop the 2022 budget and related documents in accordance with the following parameters. 1, assumption growth in tax assessment of 1.4%. 2, a municipal levy increase of 3% to the operating budget, plus the amounts prescribed by table 2 in the workforce plan. And 3, a municipal levy increase of 4.5% to the capital budget.
Can you just amend that to say the workforce plan report, staff report?
Or staff report, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So is there a mover and seconder then for that motion, please? Thanks, Janet. It's moved. And second, thanks, Phil. Do we have any further discussion about the 2022 budget assumptions? Okay,
But I
seeing not.
just add that you, the reduction to a third changes to $114,887. So it'd be much easier to sell to your council, your portion of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. There's no other comments. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. And that carries as well. And I think this brings us to the end of our agenda. Let's scoot back up to the top. Under other new business, I was going to suggest if Eli wanted to put forward a direction to staff to devise a policy about the third-party funding requests for projects. Now, Eli is not here. Is there anyone else that would like to put that forward, or do we like to see that come ahead another time?
Review what the
Anyone on that?
just say say it again, what it was you wanted request.
So Eli had brought up during the discussions about the grant, the climate change projects grant, about we have a practice, but we don't have a policy specific to how we would deal with funding requests. And he seemed to feel that a policy would be easier to stand on, which is true. A policy is easier to stand on than a practice. And during those discussions, I had mentioned, if the committee saw it as something that we'd like to see, we could direct staff to devise a policy specifically. If there's not a burning feeling that that's a priority, we can also leave it, and I can have a chat with Eli to bring that forward another time.
I would just like to ask the general manager if is that doable? It doesn't sound like it's an onerous policy. And if it is doable, then or whoever wants to take on the question, I guess.
I'm happy to take that direction.
Right, so that I would make that motion then that we consider developing a policy on. Give me the words again.
So it was funding requests for projects. Right now we would
funding request for projects. Yeah.
Okay, so it's moved by Phil that direction. Is there someone who would second that? Thanks, Janet. This is something obviously that's going to come back for us to chew on, but just to tick it off the list for Eli, it gets that ball rolling. Is there any discussion then on this, or are we comfortable with that direction? Okay, all in favor of, or not sure, Jeff, did you have something? Oh, all in favor? Okay, we're ready to vote. Okay, thanks. So that carries. Thanks very much. And thanks to staff for taking a look at that. And then a motion for adjournment. Trying to see, do we actually need a motion? Yes, we do need a motion. So be it resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adjourned at 3:27. Phil moves and seconded by Andrew. Thank you very much. All in favor of adjournment? There we go. Thanks. We are adjourned. Thanks very much. That was a really important meeting. So thanks, everybody.
Well chaired, Krista. Well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
See you all
Take
next
care,
week.
everybody. Yeah, see you
Bye-bye.
next week.
No.